From Washington, D.C., this is Middle East Focus.
Hello, and welcome to Middle East Focus, a weekly podcast on regional affairs and U.S. policy, produced by the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. I'm Alistair Taylor, MEI's editorial director. You can subscribe to Middle East Focus on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast providers. On today's program, we'll be speaking with Dr. Haider al-Abadi, the former Prime Minister of Iraq, about the country's fight against ISIS, Iraqi politics and the challenges of reform, and the outlook for Iraq moving forward. Dr. Abadi has a new book out entitled Impossible Victory: How Iraq Defeated ISIS. Dr. Abadi has served in a variety of positions in the Iraqi government since 2003, including Minister of Communications, Advisor to the Prime Minister, Chair of the Parliamentary Finance and Economic Committees, Deputy Speaker of Parliament, and of course, Prime Minister from 2014 through 2018. In the latter role, he led Iraq's military campaign against ISIS as Commander-in-Chief. Dr. Abadi, welcome to the program, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Dr. Abadi, you've just come out with a new book, Impossible Victory: How Iraq Defeated ISIS. What inspired you to write the book, and why is it important now?
Well, first, it is a huge challenge which we have overcome. And from looking at the problems which are facing the world at the moment, whether it's Afghanistan or whether it's Ukraine and all the challenges of the wars, I think this can be a huge contribution for leaders and decision makers to look at events and to look at challenges that they are facing and the way to go around them. I think here in Iraq, that's why I called it impossible victory, because in the eyes of many, our victory over Daesh was almost impossible in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. But we achieved it. We didn't have much capabilities then, and we used the same capabilities as we had when we lost our territory to Daesh or to ISIS. But we managed to have victory with much less casualties and damage than anticipated at the time. Don't forget, this is a vicious organization, terrorist organization, and they inspired by causing much more damage and casualties on civilians. I think that's their ideology as such. Even then, we managed to liberate our people and our land with minimum casualties or damage, although it is still very, very important for us. So I think that's why I wrote the book. It's an experience. To me, it's not my experience only, it's experience of Iraqi people. And this is a human experience. And I would like others to share us by looking at this book and reading through the challenges which we have faced.
You highlight a number of factors that were key to defeating ISIS in the book, perhaps the most important of which was creating a sense of common purpose among the Iraqi people and tapping into their latent nationalism. How did you help foster that, and what impact did it have?
Well, it's quite a challenge. Don't forget, when I took office, morals were very, very low. And many people, the majority of people, looked at Daesh or ISIS as undefeatable. These are people, they can have few members and few fighters, and they can control large swaths of territory, which they did. I think only probably a few hundreds from Syria to Iraq. And they caused a lot of damage. A third of the Iraqi territory were occupied by them. They were controlling over 10 million population in both Syria and Iraq. The size of the mini state which they have created is huge. It's bigger than many states in the Middle East. What I thought, I cannot overcome this enemy if people are not with me, if they're not sharing my desire to liberate them, if they don't join me in the belief that they are defeatable. We can inflict fear into their own hearts. We can win over the population where they are being controlled by ISIS, and then we can defeat them. It's a goal, but you have to be insistent on it. I did have a lot of challenges. Many people didn't believe me at the beginning. They thought we cannot change others. They thought we cannot win people over. They thought we cannot claim back our territory of Iraqi territory and win back our population in these areas. But if you are a believer and you have a vision and you have to work out a process step by step, how you reach that goal, I think this is a success. And this is a huge goal at the beginning. We lost our territory. We didn't have capabilities to fight. Many divisions collapsed. The remaining divisions were almost breaking down. They didn't have the will to fight. And you establish a huge goal that you can reverse all of this. is not enough just to have a beautiful and very inspiring goal. You have to lay down processes, each individual one, and you have to achieve it, little one. And you have to show them, look, we got there. We have to move then to the next step. I did explain this in the book. To be honest with you, I'm not a commander. I'm not a military person at all. I never served in any military, but it's mostly logic and human thinking and being very caring about others. You have to have others. You have to trust them so that they can deliver at the end of the day. That's what I did.
Taking a step back, what are the most important lessons that other countries, both within the region and around the world, should learn from Iraq's defeat of ISIS?
Well, I think the public must be a stakeholder in all of this. The public must see it as their own cause. This is their fight. This is their country. And others cannot do it on their behalf. That's why I was very careful not to be so reliant on our international supporters like the West and the US in particular, although we welcome any support from them. But if you are over-reliant on them, then your people won't fight. They don't consider it as their fight. They don't consider it as their victory. They have to feel it. They have to live it. It's their victory. That's number one. It's very important, especially in the Middle East, where we don't have many freedom in our countries in the Middle East. If people don't share the feeling that this is their country, they have a stake holding in it, a huge stakeholding is theirs, people would not fight. I think this is a huge lesson for leaders in the Middle East. We have to move forward on this.
How worried are you about a potential resurgence of ISIS in Iraq now?
I'm not much worried about Iraq. I'm worried about Syria in particular. I think there are cells and elements of Daesh who are very, very active now in Syria, especially in large deserted areas. Don't forget, these are quite hardened fighters. They can live through very difficult circumstances, and they are doing this, and they can win and build forces loyal to them gradually. See, Daesh or ISIS, they don't need large numbers. They need very few people because they govern by fear, by atrocities. And you have only few numbers of them that they can scare a whole nation because people at large are not armed, they're not trained, they're not organized, they don't know how to fight back as a community. But if you have this solid, hardened core of terrorists who have an ideology, and that ideology is very inspiring to them, don't forget, Daesh did gather many terrorists from all over the world, more than 100 countries all over the world. They had different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages. They all put them together and worked together to their own cause. So they have very devious, very dangerous ideology, but it works in a sense that it can cause a lot of carnage, a lot of killing, and it can destroy societies. So I think I have that fear now because the major reason why they were terrorists is still there. We have a young generation in the Middle East who probably don't have much hope. And this is the major cause. This can push some young people, talented, some of them talented young people, to look for alternative, which is terrorism, which is to try to turn the table on others, try to turn the world order upside down so that their voices will be heard.
Shifting gears, I want to turn now to domestic politics and the problems facing Iraq. More than 6 months on from the October 2021 elections, Iraq still lacks a government. The problems with the government formation process are clear. At what point does the current situation simply become untenable?
Yes, it's very unlucky because these are supposed to be early elections to mend the faults of 2018 elections. But we ended up with a worse scenario. In 2018, we've taken less time to create government than now. It's still deadlock. There is an argument between, do we want a government of national unity where all those who are willing to serve and they are willing to contribute will form it, or do just a few of us will form that government and kick others to the opposition? I think this is the argument at the surface of it. But in reality, the argument is, well, we will control the country and you are out. And this is very bad for the country because you have to salvage the country. And you cannot salvage the country if you sideline others, because others, I don't know what's in their mind, but many will try to stall you to prevent you from moving forward because you've kicked them out and contributing. They're not stakeholders anymore. So they don't want to see you as a winner in that regard. And I think this is a deadlock, in my opinion. Either way, you cannot succeed. You have to bring almost everybody on board to succeed. All must be contributors to achieve and deliver to the people. Especially this election, the turnover was very, very low. There were a lot of lost votes. I can give you just an example. The votes which are attributed to the current member of parliament who won the votes represent only 16% of the total vote of eligible voters, which is very, very low.
In the book, you write that you fear Iraq may be headed towards state collapse like Lebanon, which you say serves as a stark warning with deeply troubling parallels to Iraq's own situation. Why is that, and what do you think can be done to prevent it from happening?
I think it's a fear, in actual fact. It's not unavoidable, but if we are not careful, we'll head towards that. If everybody wants to take their dues from the state and they don't care about the rest, I think we'll end up with the same thing. Nobody is responsible. All are watching and say, well, it's not us, it's others. So this is a scenario which we are facing at the moment. It's very dangerous, like what happened in Lebanon, as you say, especially on the economical crisis. Of course, unlike Lebanon, Iraq has oil, and oil can probably solve many of our problems as such, but they don't solve the problems long term. What's about in a few years' time when oil prices drop, when oil is not that valuable to the larger world? What will we do? I think it can be a curse on Iraq and on the Iraqi people when they found that they don't have the wealth they thought they did. So in that regard, I think the current rise on oil prices give us some room to maneuver, but we have to do it right rather than wrong. We shouldn't rely on oil in paying many expenditure unnecessary. We have to use this wealth to build the infrastructure, to build the economy, to create jobs. This is my idea for using oil in the right direction. And if we don't, there is a fear that we will be a failed state again.
Indeed, high oil prices present something of a double-edged sword. It provides breathing room on the one hand, but on the other hand, it also provides an opportunity to kind of kick the can down the line a little bit more. Many of the major problems that plague Iraq, like corruption, youth unemployment, poor service provision, have been an issue for years at this point. You know them well. You dealt with them yourself as prime minister. What do you think it will take to really move the needle in addressing some of these problems?
Number one, you should look at oil as a means to take the country out of current situation rather than relying on oil. Because Iraq in particular, unlike some of the Gulf states, we have large population and our wealth is smaller than some of our Gulf neighbors. We have probably 30 times their population. And in this regard, the oil on its own is not enough for our public, although we may seem rich with oil, but we live poor. So we have to use the oil in a very smart way to move the economy forward, to build our infrastructure, how we create job in the private sector in particular, rather than government employment. It is easy for politicians to rely on government employment because they will win votes, they will win support. But what they're doing, to be honest with you, is treason, because they know very well in a few years' time, we are not able to pay these salaries and to pay the pensions of these people because we are relying on the oil, and the income of that oil is going to become less and less over years. So I think that the main issue is not to rely on the oil. It's not enough for Iraqi public. It's about 40 million people. And this wealth, if you divide it by the number of population, would become a very little wealth. It's not huge. So you cannot just distribute it on the people. You just allocate it on the people. You use it for the benefit of the people to build for your new current generation and future generation. In this regard, I think we can thrive.
Looking at the broader regional scene, the Middle East is currently going through a period of great change amidst the impact of the war in Ukraine, growing U.S. Gulf tensions, and efforts to revive the Iran nuclear deal. What is your read on the changing regional dynamics, and what do you think all of this could mean for Iraq?
Well, it's very unknown now, to be honest with you. Nobody knows which direction it's all going. Now, will more powerful country eat the smaller and weaker country? Are we going to see this in the near future? Because there are many disputes in the Middle East and somewhere else. Even here in Iraq with our neighbors, there are many disputes for a long period of time. Is this going to be sorted out by force? The one who's more powerful are going to take what they think is theirs by force? I think this is a huge challenge in the coming years. The second one is the impact of less food on the world stage. Yes, of course, but we're in Iraq because we have higher oil prices. We can compensate for the public for essentials. But what's about other countries in the Middle East who don't have this oil as we have? I have read the World Bank's report today about Iraq, and the growth of our economy is anticipated to be the highest in the Middle East in the coming year. But I think this is only attributed to the oil because we have benefits usually from the price of oil rather than other countries, because our lease or our sale of oil is on the spot rather than this long contract. A lot of the Middle Eastern oil countries, they have longer contract, and many of them didn't benefit now immediately from higher oil prices. Having said that, it's very unknown, to be honest with you. It can go either way. The good thing is there may be more tolerance between countries in the region and other superpower or Western countries. I think everybody is seeing the limits of their power. It's very clearly they have to cooperate. You cannot enforce your vision on others in this regard. And we have seen this relationship between some of the Gulf states and the US in particular. I think we need a new vision in this regard. Iran nuclear agreement, we don't know which direction this is heading, although they have agreed on probably something like 99%. But the last 1% is very important to both sides, and it may not go through. Now, what's the impact of that? Will there be escalation between the US and Iran, especially you look at Russia, China? There are many challenges in this regard. So we are here in the middle. I think for Iraq, maybe the situation is not that bad if you compare it with other countries.
I want to turn finally to your outlook for Iraq moving forward. In Impossible Victory, you write that you believe Iraq can and must triumph over adversity again. What do you see as the biggest potential threats on the horizon?
It's bad governance. This is enemy number one. Bad governance will make you lose all your past achievements, present achievements, and will lose the faith of the people. You have to carry the people with you. You cannot just govern with small minority of people supporting you. The majority of people should not be passive. They should be active, and they should be stakeholder in this regard. So this is bad governance. To me, is a disease number one and enemy number one. To me, it's more serious than COVID-19.
You also write in the book that you're an optimist and that you believe people can do anything as long as they have the will. In our conversation today, we focused mainly on the past and present challenges facing Iraq. But what makes you most hopeful about the country's future prospects?
People, because I've seen a lot of others, they told me, well, you cannot do impossible. This is a wastage. And this is a war which we only will give sacrifices without an end. Of course, such passive people, they don't have solutions, of course. They only have fear, conspiracy theory, and they think their own end is decided by others, not by their own action. I think my thinking is that you can achieve things by your own action, regardless of course, the results. Maybe there are more formidable forces facing you, but still you have to contribute. And your contribution will be seen by yourself, will be seen by others. And you have to do this step by step. I think what happened in Iraq has surprised many Iraqis. I'm not uncovering a secret by saying many politicians and Iraqis thought the country will never come back together. They thought we've lost these areas. We've lost Nainam, we lost al-Abadi, we lost last large swath of territory and population to our enemies, the terrorists. And they thought it's impossible to win them back. But when we did, and the people, they see themselves as one country, one people, it's like a miracle. So I'm a believer in this. You can turn the event the other way, but there must be conditions met. A, you must have a vision. B, You must have the right process to do this. And C, you must be very, very consistent. You cannot be just wavering left and right, back and forth. You're very consistent, move forward, and I think the events will be in your direction.
We're running short on time, but before we conclude, any final thoughts?
Yes, I think if you look now at Ukraine, it's a huge lesson. I've seen the problem of the Russian army. I've seen it myself, where there's a problem with command and control. There's a problem with maintenance of equipment. There's a problem with logistics, how you may have a formidable army, a huge number of soldiers. But what's about the logistics, caring for them, repairing their vehicles, fighting like tanks and others? I think any leader should not overlook these small things. They see it as a small thing, but it can lead you to defeat. You may not achieve your mission. And especially with Russia at the moment, I think the Russian soldiers see themselves as aggressors. And psychologically, this is very effective on soldiers. They don't have that motivation. It's a foreign country for them. It's not their country. It's not their people. So I anticipated that at the beginning, that things may not move in the direction where Russian leadership are seeing it. And I can see very clearly why the Russians didn't achieve their goal. I mean, the leader sitting up there is not with his fighters to see their problems, their weaknesses, the weaknesses of his military. This is a huge lesson for leaders if they want to go in that direction. The second one, I think now the world is not like before. Before, an occupying force can submit a whole nation. There's no public opinion, there's no media. We would hear about it probably centuries later or many years later that there were atrocities, that the whole thing has been done, all the mess has been achieved. But now the world is one. You hear it the minute it happens, and there's a public opinion which affect other. It influence their own thinking, their own decision making. So you have to take this into account. I mean, can you make others submit to you by force, and for how long? Especially with open media, the world is almost one. I hear people here saying, "Well, this is a conspiracy," because you can see events appearing everywhere. I tell them, "Oh, well, it doesn't need a conspiracy. You have social media, people can learn. People are not stupid. They can see what others are doing and they want to duplicate it, like a catwalk and others. And because they are under pressure, because they have some aspiration to achieve, so they can copy others and learn from them. That's how we got there. I mean, humanity, all these advances, it didn't happen in just one century. It's contribution of the whole community, different areas, from China, from the Middle East, from the West. Each one of them contributed to this knowledge, human achievement. Everyone is learning from another to achieve this. I think this is lesson number one. If you want to repeat history, you cannot now. It's not like old empires occupying large nations and submit them to their own will. And over time, they will be successful. No, it will not happen again.
We'll have to leave things there for today, but Dr. Abadi, thank you again for joining us on the program.
Well, thank you much, Alyssa. Thank you.
That was Dr. Haider al-Abadi, former Prime Minister of Iraq. Again, his new book is called Impossible Victory: How Iraq Defeated ISIS. You can follow all of MEI's coverage of Iraq on our website at www.mei.edu. That's all the time we have this week. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in, and to our production team for their work on this week's episode. You can follow MEI on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and subscribe to our email newsletters for the latest analysis and information about upcoming events. I'm Alistair Taylor. We will see all of you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Middle East Institute. To support MEI's programs and podcasts, please donate at www.mei.edu. Thank you for your support.